OK, welcome, everyone, to today's Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do are these Office Hour Hangouts, where webmasters and publishers can join us and ask their web search-related questions. Looks like we just have 2 people here live, which is fine. If more people want to join in, feel free to
and ask
come on.
their web search-related questions.
Whoops, here we go.
OK. Like we just have 2 people.
All right.
3 people.
3 people now.
Yeah.
It's going to grow exponentially. All right. So as always, a bunch of questions were submitted already. So we can go through those. Or if any of you want to get started with a question of your own, you're welcome to jump on in now.
I can jump. Okay. I have a question. Yeah, I have a question about duplicate block in one website. For example, I have a few clients, and they have they have the same block, for example, in the main page or review page, portfolio page, and other pages, and all these blocks are the same, And I told them you need to remove them because it's not good to have duplicate content on one website. But they checked on Google Analytics that people don't visit many other pages, and they read in any of these pages this block. It means it's like the common, the most part is review block, review block or testimonials and stuff like this. What do you think? It's good or not, to have duplicate block like this?
It's not terrible. So I think if it works for your users, that's usually fine. The tricky part is if someone searches for that content, which is in this kind of block of text that's duplicated, then it's hard for us to know which of these pages we should be showing in search. And maybe that's something that nobody searches for, in which case it doesn't matter. Maybe we're does it look like this piece of text is just randomly copied on all pages of the website. But if it's in the places where it makes sense, I think that's usually fine, yeah.
OK. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Because what happens in practice is it's not that we would demote the website and say it's low quality, but rather if someone searches for just something in that piece of text, we would just show one of those pages. So it's like we would just pick one. It's that the website would be seen as low quality just because it has one block of text that's duplicated across multiple pages.
OK. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
OK, John, just one a little bit more duplicate content question, because we're on the same topic at the moment. I see that people are talking about tags, especially the WordPress tags, for content, and sometimes they talk that these tags are generating duplicate content and so on. But despite the fact people are using it, how Google treats the tags actually on the WordPress specifically? Because most of the websites today are using WordPress, and because it's easy to use for content management. And the question is how Google is treating the content, because as we know that we sometimes assign different tags or sometimes the same tag on 5 or 10 different posts. How Google treats this?
I think that would fall into pretty much the same category as before, where it's kind of one chunk of text on these pages that you're duplicating across multiple other pages, like either the snippet of the article, the blog post, or the whole blog post, depending on how you have it set up. And that essentially what happens then is if someone is searching for a piece of text from that duplicated chunk, then we'll try to pick one of those pages and show those in search. Because we know this whole chunk is the same across multiple pages on your website, so it doesn't make sense to show multiple pages for that one query.
Sure. Yeah.
So we just pick one of those. In practice, it's something that usually works out well because, like you said, a lot of people do this and they don't do it with bad purposes or anything.
Yes.
We try to figure it out. But obviously, as an SEO, if you want to say, well, this is the page that I really want people to go to when they search like this, then that's something that you can guide by saying, well, I'll only have this content on one page then. Whereas if you have it on multiple pages, then maybe they go to the tag page or the category page, or maybe they go to the blog post directly. It's kind of hard for you to control that. So
yes,
if you want more control, then that's definitely an option. If you don't care and usually it just works, then maybe that's fine too.
So it's up to us if we will prevent the indexing of the tag pages, or we will leave them as they are, and to leave to the audience to choose the right page, and of course the Google algorithms too.
Yeah, I think it's something where when you're talking about a simple review or like a 2-3 sentence snippet of text, it doesn't matter so much. But if it's the whole blog post, then that's something where you're saying, well, probably as an SEO, as an online business, you have a really strong preference with regards to which page you want people to land on.
Yes.
So in that case, then I would just make that preference really clear and say, well, people should go to my blog post directly and not to one of these other pages. All right, let's take a look at some of the...
OK, thank you.
Sure. Let's take a look at some of the submitted questions. With structured data, is there any advantage in extending the data with the additional properties fields possible in schema.org? So there are lots of different ways that you can extend structured data. In schema.org, there's markup for pretty much everything, including cheese, which is obviously very important. But that's not to say that it's a ranking factor. So what usually happens here is the markup that we require for a specific search feature, that's usually what people would aim for, because they want to have a certain search feature in the search results. So they make sure that they comply with our guidelines and our required attributes and values that we have in the developer documentation. And when you do that, we can pick up that markup. We can show that search feature, or at least you're eligible to be shown for that search feature. It's obviously not guaranteed. But you kind of have things covered. When it comes to everything else that you can also add to these pages, we do process that. We do look at that when it comes to indexing. However, there's no immediate visible effect from that. So in practice, what happens is it helps us to better understand these pages. It gives us a little bit more context about the entities that you're talking about, which can make it possible for us to show it in more relevant search results. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll have higher ranking for those queries. So that's kind of the two sides there. So from a practical point of view, I think if you want to have a specific search feature, then definitely focus on the requirements for that in our developer documentation. If you want to go beyond that, then that's totally up to you. I wouldn't spend like immense amount of time to mark up every word on your page, because that's probably not going to help very much. But you certainly are welcome to mark up more than just the minimal requirements. That's kind of up to you. I don't know how much of a return you'll see for that. So that's something I just want to put out there ahead of time. So if this is something that you can easily do because you have all of this data already, then go for it. If it's something where you need to spend a year focusing on and kind of adding a database to include all of the different variations and all of the markup types, then probably that time would be better spent focusing on other things on the website, where you can kind of visibly and significantly move things forward. Can you speak to the necessity of...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, John. Can I ask you a question about it? Because I saw something in the Google Search Console, unparsable structured data. In this particular instance, I have a feeling I should just ignore it. It was 2 examples, and the 2 examples that it gave were actually shortened URLs, which led to stories that have been redirected. Is that just something to completely ignore and eventually will scroll out?
Yeah.
It's been kind of, though, sitting there for a while.
Yeah.
Like a month or two. OK.
Yeah, I think we recently added that because people sometimes use structured data in a way that is completely unparsable for us. So even if we wanted to use that at some point in the future, then we wouldn't be able to use that specific setup that you have there. It sounds like in your case, you're already saying, well, I don't care if this is ignored. Then that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it was just 2 examples out of maybe 60 or so, I think. OK, thank you.
Cool. All right. Can you speak to the necessity of EAT and author biography pages linked from an article? So EAT is expertise, authority, trustworthiness, I think. And it comes from our quality rater guidelines, which are basically the guidelines that we give the folks who help us to improve our algorithms overall. So kind of the necessity of the author biography pages. Should we have the author's credentials on the article itself, or is linking to the biography by their byline good enough? We have an issue where the author bio pages are meta no index. Does this stop Googlebot and or Google quality raters from accessing the pages? Do raters access pages which are no index? So I think, first of all, it's worth keeping in mind that our quality raters help us to improve our algorithms overall. They do not review individual websites. So it's not something where you need to optimize your websites for access by quality raters. Essentially, our quality raters, what they do is when teams at Google make improvements to the algorithms, we'll try to test those improvements. So what will happen is we'll send the quality raters a list of search results pages with a version with that change and without that change. And they'll go through and see which of these results are better and why are they better. And to help them evaluate those 2 results, we have the quality rater guidelines. So it's not the case that anything that a search quality rater would do would immediately affect your website or any particular website. You don't need to send things to them again. You don't need to optimize things for them specifically. But rather, they help us to improve our algorithms so that we can automatically review or algorithmically review the whole web when it comes to understanding the relevance of these pages overall. So that's kind of out on the side there. So it's not something where you would have to worry about whether the search quality raters look at specific pages on your website or what they do, because what these quality raters do is totally independent of how your website ranks. With regards to author pages and expertise, authority, trustworthiness, that's something where I'd recommend checking that out with your users and doing maybe a short user study specifically for your setup, for the different setups that you have, trying to figure out how you can best show that the people who are creating content for your website, they're really great people. They're people who know what they're talking about. They have credentials or whatever is relevant within your field. So that's less something where I would focus on this as a technical thing, like you need to do this, this, and this, or this type of markup for these pages, but rather more as a quality thing, as a user experience thing, where you can actually do user tests with your users directly. Let's see. Post-migration, if the bare root domain does not resolve to the home page, but the www does, what is the possible issue? I believe it's something with the DNS, but I'm uncertain. What's the impact of this if it were left alone? So usually that's an issue with the hosting setup that you have, which could be either the DNS or it could be something on the server side. And for the most part, that's not critical, but I would recommend resolving that regardless. The tricky part, what can sometimes happen, is that we will kind of test pages from your website, and it might be that our algorithm think that something isn't right with this website in the sense that maybe it went offline or it's not available anymore. So especially if it's after a site migration, after a bigger change on your website, and then suddenly a part of your website, like the non-www version or the www version, doesn't work anymore at all, then that could be a sign that we think that maybe this website has gone offline. So I'd certainly try to resolve that. Usually, your hoster can help you to fix that. Usually, it's also something really small where you just need to, I don't know, set the right checkboxes in the right places, make sure that the redirect is set up to the version that you want to keep, and then it all just works out. In most cases, also, we can work around this, and we can still kind of focus on the version that is there. But I just cover this to make sure that you don't end up in a situation later on where you're like, oh, man, if only I had fixed that problem early, then I wouldn't have whatever problem has come up. Is there a maximum number of links that a page can have? Does Googlebot stop crawling after a certain number of links? Do links that appear first in the HTML get prioritized for indexing and ranking? So usually what happens with the links in an HTML page is we take all of the page rank that we've collected for these pages, and we try to pass that on through the links on this page. And if you have an infinite number of links on a page, then that part of the page rank that is passed on will be infinitely small. So at some point, it's just kind of a practical cutoff where like it's 0.0 whatever, like really small, tiny number that's being passed on through each of these links, which basically is 0. So that's kind of what happens if you have a ton of links on a page. From a practical point of view, I think we have an upper limit which is extremely high, something like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 links on a page, which is something that most websites or web pages don't run into. So it's not something that we've had documented for a really long time. It used to be that we would recommend, I think, under 100 or under 200 links. But that's something that we've been able to increase quite a bit since then. So we don't even have that documented anymore. From a practical point of view, I would try to stick to a reasonable number that users can actually use on a page. So I avoid just going off into thousands of links on a single page, because it's unlikely that it's going to be useful for users, because they're not going to find that link to actually use. With regards to the first links on an HTML page or not, if they get prioritized, no, they don't. We open the page, we parse the content, pull out all of the information that we have on this page, and then we go through and follow all of those links. It's not something that we kind of have more weight for links that are like in the beginning of the HTML file. We're thinking of the option to start only serving server-side rendering for bots on some of our pages. Is this an accepted behavior by Google and friends nowadays? Do you see any objections on why not to do this? So you can definitely do this from our point of view. This is what we call, I believe, dynamic rendering, which is basically when you're pre-rendering the pages for a specific set of users. Usually that includes crawlers, maybe social media, user agents, all of those things that are basically not normal users that wouldn't be able to process JavaScript. And that's certainly something you can do. Sometimes it also makes sense to use server-side rendering for users as well. Sometimes you can significantly speed up the delivery of HTML pages to them. So it's not something that I'd consider as something that you only need to do for bots. It's probably worthwhile to check to see if there are ways that you can leverage that same setup for users as well. Maybe you can. Maybe that doesn't make sense in your specific case. Kind of something you'd have to look at there. In any case, from our side specifically, it's something that you can do. I suspect over time, over the long run, it'll be something that you'll have to do less and less. Googlebot is able to crawl pretty much every JavaScript type page nowadays. I suspect other user agents will follow up with that over time as well. So I would see this as something kind of as a temporary workaround, where temporary might mean a couple of years, but it's more of a time-limited workaround. And at some point, pretty much every relevant user agent will be able to process JavaScript. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too deeply into my crystal ball, but that's kind of how I would see it there. Can you tell me why Search Console, some 404 links go to the not found 404 report, and some of them go to the crawl anomaly report? Why aren't they all just 404s? I don't know. So I looked into this briefly with the Search Console team beforehand, and I don't have a clear answer for you yet. I'll definitely check this out again for the next Hangout, though. So if you want to copy that question over, feel free to do that as well. Cloaking, showing more content to users and less to Googlebot isn't cloaking, but showing some content to bots and not to users is cloaking. For example, blocking the content by robots text for Googlebot. I think it's really tricky to differentiate some of those use cases with all of the legal requirements that are out there nowadays and some of the technical details there. What I would definitely watch out for is to make sure that the primary content of your pages is essentially the same for both users and search engines, so that anything that's shown in search matches what users would be able to find when they go to your page. Obviously, there are lots of weird edge cases that make this tricky sometimes. But for the most part, for most websites, that seems to work out fairly well. Yeah. Aside from the structured data markup tool, the Search Console help form, your documentation, and schema.org documentation itself, is there somewhere else where I can get guidance on local business markup that I'm planning? It sounds like you're looking in all the right places. So I would use the testing tool to make sure that it matches what you need, the documentation to see which attributes and values are required. And the help forum is usually useful for discussions among peers. So that's kind of the places that I would go to. We don't have a unique structured data or local business markup forum where you'd be able to get feedback from even another set of people. We're a niche portal for people with fertility issues. With the recent Google update, we lost more than 50% of our traffic. All articles and keywords were affected, independent from which author. We had more than 60 featured snippets, which also went away. We don't see any technical issues or backlink issues. We get good feedback from our users. I'd like to think our service is, in general, very valuable for people with fertility issues in Germany. If we have no more organic traffic, we're not able to finance our offer. We built this platform with our own money. Let's see. Goes on, like, how could it be possible that our authority can drop more than 50% overnight? What actions could we take to increase our authority? So in general, Google doesn't evaluate a site's authority. So it's not something where we would give you a score on authority and say this is the general score for authority for your website. So that's not something that we would be applying here. With regards to traffic in general, with the bigger algorithm updates that we make, we do try to figure out which pages are more relevant for users over time. And sometimes these things can change over time. So it's not a sign that you're doing anything particularly wrong. Sometimes it's just a sign that things in the general web ecosystem have changed, either on the expectance from users, the things that they expect, or with regards to the competition, the general other sites that are available out there for these topics. or just in regards to how our algorithms try to understand sites and how to rank them in the search results. So that's not a sign that you're doing anything in particular wrong. It might be a sign that there are things that you could do to improve that more, to make it clear that you are like a proper website, that there's something really behind it. I think it sounds like you're already looking into the right kinds of issues. If you started a thread in the Webmaster Help Forum, then that's probably something where you're getting some feedback from peers, which is really useful. If you're thinking about authority, if you're thinking about the search quality raters, then that sounds like you're kind of on the right track there. So one of the other questions was also about expertise, authority, trustworthiness. That kind of goes into the same direction. And it's something, from my point of view, where I would try to get more input from users or from potential users, and really try to get the more, I don't know, hard feedback that's sometimes hard to take, where people can really tell you where they think, like comparing different sites in the same niche, where they see issues that you could be doing, or where they look at your pages and say, well, I don't know if I can really trust the content on here. And it's probably the case that you've already been doing a lot of these things really well. But maybe there are things that you could be doing to do even better in that regard. I think it's always tricky when it doesn't come down to technical issues where you can say, well, this line of HTML is wrong, and I can fix it, and then everything will be OK. But quality changes, or in particular, like how relevant content might be to individual users, that's something that can have a fairly big effect on a website as well. Using the official AMP plugin for WordPress, I lose a few important elements of a page. If I switch back to non-AMP, would I experience decreased search engine appearance? These pages are blog posts. I don't know. It sounds weird that you would be losing content on the AMP pages using the normal AMP plugin. Because usually these plugins just convert your normal content into the AMP version. So my general recommendation there would be to make sure that you give this feedback to whoever is creating your AMP plugin, and kind of encourage them to take a look at your site and the AMP pages that you have there, so that they can work out how to improve that. With regards to search engine appearance, in general, AMP is not a ranking factor. So that's not something where you need to worry about that as a ranking effect. However, it is something where we would show AMP pages in the search results. And when users click on them, they see the content fairly quickly. So that might be something where you'd see kind of this indirect effect. If it takes longer for your pages to load, significantly longer, then maybe users would react differently when they visit your pages. And then over time, you might see some effect there. In practice, with regards to just the way that your search result is shown, I suspect you won't see any big ranking changes there. I have a question about rel Canonical and hreflang. One person recommended this. So Canonical is the Spanish version, alternate English version, then alternate for the Spanish version. Would you implement those set of hreflang tags and self-referencing canonical tags? Why is it important to implement a self-referencing canonical tag? So it's not critical to have a self-referencing canonical tag on a page, but it does make it easier for us to pick exactly the URL that you want to have chosen as canonical. We use a number of factors to pick a canonical URL, and the rel canonical does play a role in that. So in particular, things like URL parameters, or if the URL is tagged in any particular way, maybe you have links going to that page that are tagged for analytics, for example, then it might happen that we pick that tagged URL as a canonical. And with the rel canonical, you're telling us that you really, really want this URL that you're specifying as the canonical. And if we can pick that as the canonical, then the hreflang links, they all just perfectly work as well, because then we can kind of go from that canonical to the other canonical. Like for the Spanish canonical, we can go to the English canonical, and we can follow the link back as well to confirm the hreflang link. So it's a great practice to have the self-referencing canonical. It's not critical. It's not something that you must do. It's just something that helps to make sure that this markup is picked up properly. Our company has a separate website for job openings. We added a few new vacancies weekly, and they expire with a similar pace. Would you recommend to do those pages, or what would you recommend to do with the pages that have expired vacancies? I would treat these as normal 404 pages. Pages go away. That's perfectly fine. We will show this in Search Console as a 404 error, and that's perfectly fine, because you don't want those pages to be indexed anymore. They're not valid anymore. So having them return a 404 is perfectly fine. I noticed my CTR dropping recently with maintained rankings, and it has come to my attention that at least 3 of my main competitors are now achieving review snippets by misapplying the local business type for online businesses and going against guidelines. Is there a way I can trigger a review of their implementation? I prefer to stick within the guidelines, but it's difficult. Yeah, sometimes it's frustrating when you see your competitors doing things that you know they shouldn't be doing. That's, I think, always kind of tricky and frustrating. So what we have is the, what's it called, rich snippets spam report form. You can just search for that directly, and it should show up in the search results. It's one of the ways that you can submit spam reports to us. And the web spam team, who's following up on the guidelines with regards to the rich results types, they do look at these spam reports, and they follow up on them. Usually what happens is when the spam team sees that a site is using rich results in a way that does not comply with our guidelines, they will turn the rich results for that website off completely. So if that happens to your website, for example, then you'll get a notification in Search Console. The rich results will be turned off in the search results, and you'll be able to file a reconsideration request once you've kind of cleaned up the issues that were flagged and want to have someone take a look at that. But the spam report form is available directly in, I think, in the Help Center. It's linked from there. Is the canonical issue still present? We have a site where the homepage has dropped from the index. The canonical tag is correctly applied and is self-referencing, but Search Console is reporting that it selected a different canonical for the page, one that's on an entirely separate domain. It's been this way for about 3 weeks now. Despite submitting the page for re-indexing, we aren't seeing any changes. What's the timeline for our sites affected by the canonical issue to be resolved? This should be completely resolved now. So if you're still seeing issues like this, it would be useful to get those details. Either submit them maybe in the Webmaster Help Forum to have someone take a look, or send it to us on Twitter, or maybe even just add them as a reply to the comment here on the YouTube community page.
OK, we'll do that. Thank you.
All right. It's been almost 3 months since we applied for reconsideration requests for manual action, and still no response. We're wondering if this is normal. We followed all the guidelines, disavowed spammy links, removed the unnatural ones, documented everything, but still no answer. That seems out of the ordinary. Usually, these reconsideration requests are processed within a couple of weeks. So if it's been 3 months, then that seems like something maybe got stuck somewhere. I think you sent me this on Twitter directly as well. So I sent that on to the web spam team to take a look to see what's happening there. Is there an advantage in coding structured data in one block of code in a graph, just like Yoast does it in WordPress now? So in the structured data testing tool, you can see one graph and not a different block of schema. I don't think so. So I don't know offhand how this plugin does it. But essentially, we pull out the information from the page. And when it comes to structured data, we kind of have the relationship between individual items and their attributes and values. So that's something where it doesn't really matter so much how you structure this on the page. We'll pull it out and try to pull out those connections between those individual entities there. And it might make it easier for you to code if you have a clean structure on your page. Definitely easier to extend over time. But it's not something where you'd see any positive effect when it comes to search. We can process both of those kinds of setups on our side. Some sites even use different kinds of structured data. Like they'll use microdata and JSON-LD, and they'll mix that on a page for different types of elements on a page. And that's perfectly fine, too. Oh, wow. Lots of stuff happening in the chat here. Woohoo. I think the competitor with the rich results, we talked about that briefly as well. Oh, I think this one is about kind of a table with information below the search result. So I don't know offhand which type of search result that is, but we do have situations where we will pull out information from a page and show it in a slightly tabular form, which could be shown in the snippet as well. So maybe you're seeing that.
Yeah, I think I am speaking about that. And I wonder, the HTML table structure, is a necessity for this snippet? Or maybe a list can be worked too?
Yeah, it should work either way. So
Okay.
in the beginning, we talked with the team about that, and we asked them if we should recommend, like you should make a table, or you should set it up like this or like that. And they said we shouldn't make any specific recommendations. If people have a clean HTML on their site, then we should be able to pick that up.
Okay,
So
table or list, it's not. It doesn't have a difference. Just we should have a clear information in our page. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. Then the canonical issue, I think we talked about that briefly. And then there are people swapping email addresses. OK. Cool.
John,
All right.
Quick comment. Sorry. Going back to the canonical issue I was asking about. So we did tweet about it to you guys, and it, in the flood of things, it hasn't been seen yet. Is there a way that we can escalate it, since it does seem like this is evidence that the canonical issue hasn't yet been resolved? Since it's something in Search Console, I'm worried that if we post in a forum, they won't have our backend access to be able to help resolve it.
Yeah, probably just update the tweet then. Yeah.
Okay.
Or, I mean, if you can drop the URL here in the chat, then I can take a look afterwards as well. Yeah. That should work too.
Okay, I'm going to drop it right here, and then we will retweet it. Thank you again.
OK. Cool. Any other questions from you all before I start digging for more questions? Nothing up? OK. Let's see what else is new. For hreflang, can one CCTLD have sitemap set up and another CCTLD have the HTML set up? Yes. Yes. We kind of similar to the structured data, we extract the information from these pages as we recrawl them. So if we have that information from a sitemap file or from the on-page HTML or in the HTML headers, then we'll pick that up, and then we'll process that information independently of the format that we received it. So if you have it set up differently across different sites, that's perfectly fine. We detect that Google shows the forum snippet in the search results, but we're a news site. How can we inform you to change this? This is something that we pick up algorithmically, automatically, when reviewing the pages. So it's not necessarily something that we would manually change on our side. So what I'd recommend doing there is kind of looking at your pages to see, is this really something that is problematic? With regards to ranking, that's not something that would be problematic. It's really just kind of the snippet that's shown there. And if it's something that within your pages you think you'd prefer not to have the snippet shown like this, then I would try to kind of track back to see where it might be coming from. Maybe you have a lot of comments on these pages, and it looks a lot like a forum page or kind of like a discussion page. Then maybe we're picking it up from that. And kind of depending on what you want to do, that might make sense to format that in a way that it's clear that these are just comments and not a discussion about this topic, or maybe even in a way that we don't see those comments at all. Ultimately, it's kind of up to you. Again, from a ranking point of view, it's not that we would say this is a forum page and we would rank it differently than a news page. It's really purely a kind of cosmetic issue with regards to a snippet that's shown in the search results. What happens if a page that is not a job or live TV is specified with the Google Indexing API? Is it indexed? Is there any problem with using the API to push pages to Google? So the indexing API is really only meant for job postings and live video, I think live video, or live stream pages. So I'd recommend not using it for normal HTML pages. It's really not meant for that. With regards to what happens there at the moment, that's something that can change over time. So I wouldn't rely on this as being a primary means of getting content into Google. Instead, what I would do is just use a normal method. So use a sitemap file, ping the sitemap file. You can use the inspect URL tool for individual URLs if there's something that you urgently need to have indexed in that regard. But I wouldn't rely on some kind of esoteric method of getting content to Google. I'd really try to use the normal methods. I don't think you would see a negative effect from using the indexing API for things that it's not meant to be used for, but you might not see the positive effect that you're looking for. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that when it comes to ranking pages, it's not that we need to be able to crawl these pages more often. So it's not the case that you need to kind of like trick Google into crawling your pages more frequently, and then you'll rank better. The crawling side is really independent of the ranking side. So that's another thing that often comes up in this regard. Just like my page is not being crawled as often as it used to be. Well, if we have it indexed, we don't need to recrawl it unless there's something significantly different on the page in the meantime. OK, I think we got most of those covered. What's happening on your side? What else is up?
Hey, Joe.
Hi.
So just want to do a quick follow-up on last time I talked about a few Romanian results that included certain pages from the same website that appear like search pages with various terms that kind of return the same results. And it was a large part of the page, the first page of results. With the latest update, the one with less results from the same website, it's also seemed to have been reduced here in terms of the results from that website in particular. But the pages that remain still have this issue where they're basically the same page. There's just duplicate pages because the search query term is just slightly different, but the actual page returns pretty much the same content. So I'll just paste the search URL here again, just to give you an idea. So yeah, this is just basically an update to let you know that there are fewer results now, but it's still that the top results basically show the same content, which is kind of generated from queries from their search pages.
OK. So you mean the top two or multiple?
Yeah, the top two.
The top
so
two.
Top
OK.
two is there are basically search pages with the same term with just a small word separation word between them, and the results, the content is the list of products that shows up is identical. And just to give you a slightly similar query example, it's also the top two results, except the content of those results, there's actually no content because they don't have those products. So if you go on those pages, there's just says zero results on both of them, and the queries are just synonyms basically. So it's basically also almost the same. So yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll pass these examples on.
Cool.
Okay, but I'm glad to hear that it otherwise has worked out for that. That it's just the top 2 now, and not like the whole page or what it was before.
Well, I assume this update with fewer results is international, not necessarily for just a few countries. Or
yeah. Cool. All right. What else is on your minds?
John, I know that with the diversity update, it was said that subdomains were going to be treated as part of the regular domain. Is that accurate? And then is that going to change anything with how subdomains are crawled in general? And how authority is passed between subdomains and domains?
I don't think that changes anything in that regard. It's really only with regards to how we show them in the search results.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the rest of kind of the crawling and indexing side, that's something that tries to take that into account automatically anyway. So oftentimes we'll see that subdomains appear to be a part of the main domain. Sometimes we'll see cases where subdomains are clearly separate domains or separate sites, essentially. So for example, everything on Blogger is all on blogspot.com, but these are all completely different websites. So that's something that we algorithmically try to figure out anyway. And that applies to the crawling side, to the indexing side. And from a ranking point of view, that's something that we now take into account slightly differently there as well.
OK. So we actually have a group of clients. We work with automotive dealers, and we have a whole group of Porsche clients. And Porsche requires that Porsche dealer websites are set up as subdomains of the primary domain. Since these are independently operating websites, but they are all tied to the Porsche domain, but they're all about Porsche, right? One singular topic. How do you expect to see the diversity update impact those sites?
Good question. So I think I don't know. I'd have to double check the sites to try some things out. But my suspicion is that what would happen is for general topics, we'd pick one of these websites to show. So if you're searching for just this brand of car or more information on a specific car, then we would pick one of those websites to show, which would probably be the main manufacturer website or something like that, if there's a primary page for that kind of content. That's something that should be similar to how we treat that in the past as well. And when it comes to local dealers, when we can tell that a user has more of a local intent with regards to what they're searching for, then we probably just show one of the local dealers there. So what would probably happen less likely with this change is that you'd see a whole bunch of different dealers for a generic term that would be showing up, which probably makes sense in the bigger picture, because these are probably all the same pieces of content, essentially just available for multiple domains. So my feeling is that probably overall you wouldn't see a big change, because we should already have been doing similar things.
OK. I'm mainly worried about inventory, where the search might not reflect that they're looking for something local directly, except for in the intent.
Mm-hmm.
With everybody sharing inventory and inventory being similar across multiple dealerships.
Yeah,
pages could become a problem. Something I'm worried about.
Yeah, I don't know. You should be seeing this already in the search results. So probably if you're digging into analytics, you'd see if there were already kind of like changes compared, let's say, the last 7 days versus a month ago or something like that.
OK. We're digging in. I'll let you know if we see anything.
Cool. All right. Any more questions from any of you?
Yeah.
John, I have a question. Wanted to go back to the algorithmic update. I read, I think earlier this morning, that it fully rolled out by Saturday or so, and was wondering if there were going to still be some tweaks, because like a lot of it obviously is very understandable and is definitely like great, and then some of it is like, you know, a little quirky, but you find that always. So I'm just wondering if they're going to be sort of tweaks here and there.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, none of this is ever really complete. Like
Right.
These things continue to change. I think bigger changes you tend to see in bigger chunks, which would probably come separately and which we'd talk about. But otherwise, like I certainly expect small changes to happen over time.
Yeah. Thanks.
John, with the last couple of minutes, would you be willing to talk about current and maybe near future use cases for carousels and where that's going?
Carousels. So in which regard? Or
in terms of rich snippets.
I don't actually know. So
we've seen a tester in the structured data testing tool, a new feature to preview some things, and we're seeing some carousels come up from structured data we've already applied. So I imagine there's something going on here.
I don't know, to be honest. I'm not sure what specifically you're seeing there, but it's something where I do see the teams working on structured data. They continue to roll out new features. So maybe you're seeing kind of one of those as like an advanced preview type thing. But that's something where I'd expect the teams to continue to kind of try to tweak things and figure out which configuration works well for users, which configuration is easy enough for site owners to implement properly. So I certainly expect to see things kind of, I don't know, not specific to carousels, but in general with regards to the rich results types to evolve. Yeah. My guess is you're just seeing something a little bit earlier than maybe other people would be seeing. Sometimes we do small tests, and some people notice it. Some people just don't notice it that much. So maybe you're just watching out for like those small things. Cool. OK, so we're kind of out of time. Let me take all of my homework, copy that over. And the next English Hangout, I think, is set up for Friday. So if you want to join us then, feel free to jump on in there. If there's something that was missing from this Hangout, feel free to copy that over to the next Hangout as well. And otherwise, yeah, have a great week. It was great talking to you all. And see you next time. Bye,
See
everyone.
you next time, John.
Thank you so much again.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Thank you, all.